Are we ready? Are we live? Okay. All right, welcome. We are meeting this morning as the Provo City School District Board of Education. It is Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. We're meeting for the study session at 7:33 a.m. And we will begin with a roll call, and we'll start with Stephanie.
Stephanie Bryant, Business Administrator.
Gina Hales, School Board.
Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board President.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
And we have Superintendent Keith Rattel is also on Zoom with us this morning. All right. First off, I want to start out with a bit of just a study to talk about the possibility of changing the time of this meeting. It was brought up in an email, and I want to just make sure that we are talking about it as a board and deciding what would be the best plan of action. So currently we meet on the fourth Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. till about 9 a.m. Partly we did that so that those of us that have jobs at 9 a.m. can get there on time. And anyway, Rebecca, do you want to start that out?
So I just have a hard time staying for the entire morning meetings because I have to be at school by 8:45 at the very latest in order to be there with my students.
Starting?
What was that? Oh, can he not hear us?
Keith, can you hear us now?
Is it delayed? Is his comments delayed? Okay. So the reason I started the email is just because if we were able to start at 7, it would be easier for me to stay for the entire meeting. But I realized that we don't need to adjust the entire schedule for me.
Can you hear me?
If it works for everybody, that's great. If not, I'm willing to look at other options or keep it as is and just try and arrange my schedule accordingly. But that's why I brought it up. So, and then I know.
So, can I just ask you guys if you have something to say? Just raise your hand and I'll call on you, and then we'll make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. So we'll start with McKay, and then Terry.
So one thing that we've all learned is that the pandemic is making some changes that will never go back. And I realized that, we're asking people to go to school, and so we've decided to gather because we can gather. But Zoom meetings on a morning for a study session, if that was just our standard for, going forward, might assist. Because that gives you, at least an extra hour of getting ready, getting back to your destination, getting off, helping children at home. This isn't our full-time job. Certainly we'll want to conduct our business meetings in public, but even our study sessions can easily be streamed from Zoom because of the link in Zoom. Just hit YouTube and it's on there. But that's also a possibility, even as the pandemic hopefully wanes at some point. But we can take it week to week or month to month right now. But I think looking towards that might be beneficial. I know a lot of the meetings that I go to, they're going, well, we're just always going to do this, by the way. It doesn't matter. So,
Terry?
I like McKay's idea. If we're going to keep them in the morning, let's do them on Zoom. But if we're going to do them in person, let's do them after 5 p.m. I actually asked the teachers that represent the schools that I represent, and the feedback I got was, please do it after 5 p.m.
Okay. Is there any, Gina?
I just have a hard time because I have a young daughter. My husband's home, but he's working, and so it's hard for him to get her ready for school. I would have to have her sleep somewhere else so that someone else could get her ready and come to school. I can do that if we need to do that. I'm also fine with the Zoom. I'll be a team player, whatever we decide. I can figure it out.
Okay. Board Member Bryson?
I mean, personally, I'm good either way. and Zoom would work for me because I travel a ton, but there is something good about being in person and talking with people, and it seems like it's better for relationships. And as for when we do it, I would like to ask these guys, because I mean, we've all kind of,
their job.
yeah, this gets in there, you know, this is their schedule, and they have to move a lot of stuff to get here, or they either have to stay late and miss their families, or they have to come early, and I don't think it's like too early for them, so it kind of fits in their schedule when it's in the morning, instead of, if we did it from 5 till 8, but I am 100% fine either way, and Zoom works for me great, and after 5 works for me great. I'm always a lot more alert later, so.
Are we able to ask the council?
Council, do you guys want to respond at all? Or
I'm mostly concerned about their evenings.
Because we only have the 2 meetings a month, I think we can make our schedules work. I think that was very kind of you to think of us, but to be honest, we find this very important, so we can make it work, whatever works for you.
That sounds like you're sucking up.
Board Member Partridge.
I'm flexible that I can make whatever work. I do appreciate about the morning that there aren't other things that I feel like I have to rearrange that are later in the day. I agree with Nate that there is value in being together in person. So I would be fine to keep it, fine to go earlier, fine to see if we can just make them an hour instead of an hour and a half.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take this information, or well, before I guess I close this, is there any other further discussion or any other comments?
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people with childcare issues right now on this thing, so maybe 5 works better if it's fine with those guys.
No, and I mean, I see value in meeting in person as well as, and I also see, I do know that my schedule in the afternoon is much more difficult because of my own issues with getting kids and transportation and stuff. So, but it's once a month, so I can work around things. But what I would suggest is that Board Member Nielsen and I and the superintendent will discuss, and we'll let you guys know what we think would be the best plan moving forward. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I would like to start this next part about the board handbook training. I asked each of you to read this prior to coming today. I think it's a really good way to learn what a board is about, but not only that, a good reminder for all of us that have been on boards for a long time. I learned a lot going through this as well. And before we start this, I think it would be wise if maybe each of us that have been on the board that aren't new to the board to maybe say one thing they've learned during their time on the board that would be helpful. So for instance, for me, one of the biggest things I've learned is going to a meeting outside of our regular board meetings and sitting and listening and observing. I get a lot from just listening and observing and learning how the different parts of the district are running. So that would be my my observation of that. That's a good thing to learn from. Board Member Nielsen?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned from being on the board is to not be afraid to ask questions. All my high school teachers used to tell me that there's no stupid questions, and I still believe that to be true. So I just feel like being willing to ask questions to really learn and understand is very, very important, because there really is quite a lot of content that we're dealing with.
Board Member Partridge, do you have anything? Sorry.
You guys
Put
took
you on the
the
spot.
first 2 that came to my mind. I think just working with members of the community to be just open and honest, and when you don't know something, say, I'm going to go find out. and then come back to superintendent or others in the district and ask questions. That's a great way to learn things. And just have that communication among ourselves and with our constituents as well.
Board Member Jensen, you're our longest serving board member here.
So it's interesting the things that I've learned from our board, but also, you know, being asked to go and resolve problems on other boards and traveling around. I think that understanding a board's role, a board member's role, and always almost every problem comes from the things that have already been mentioned. So not listening, coming to a meeting to win an argument instead of listening, certainly is not really conducive. Not engaging the public is not conducive. But understanding that one of the most important roles is actually to give trust to a process. So we know that we're in charge of policy, but policy is just process written down. And almost every board that I see that is struggling with their community, with their employees, or with each other, they've given up sort of on, they're trying to find a way through the process or to shortcut the process. And most importantly, they inadvertently, you know, they don't just disagree, they undercut the trust in the process. And so the best thing that I see that you can do as a board is like, oh, dang it, that vote did not go my way, but that was a really good process. This is how this decision was made, and those are good people, they have goodwill, that made the best decision they could, even if it's a 4-3 vote or really close. If you can, you know, I don't think it's our responsibility to give you know, faith in almost anything else except for the process that we signed up for. We believed in enough to file papers and run for election. We should do everything we can to legitimate and to make sure the public has faith in the process of our decisions.
Board Member Bryson.
I think I've just really learned to enjoy the interactions with the other board members and the other members of council who are willing to come here. I always learn something from everyone. Everyone has their area of expertise and their opinions and observations that are a little bit different from mine, so I always find it informative to come to the meeting and listen to everyone. So,
thank you. I know I put you all on the spot for that, but what I'd like to do is going through the board handbook. I'm just going to kind of start going through. Board Member Nielsen and I will be going through this together with you, just going through over some of the parts. Superintendent Rattel, feel free to jump in when you feel like you need to add something to it as you feel necessary. But I just want to highlight some of the parts, and if any of you have questions or comments during any of this as we're going, please raise your hand and I'll call on you and we can discuss it further. Okay? So the first part I wanted to look at was under the responsibilities. I think one of the top things that we have in there is where it says to keep confidential all issues discussed in executive sessions. That's a really important part just to remember, because we get a lot of information, and to remember that some of this cannot be given to the public. So, Board Member Jensen.
So, in part of the trainings that I've been doing, I'll send you some scary pieces of material that I've been doing, and so I think we should know the stakes of that. So when we act as a board, meaning we keep the rules, and the rules are executive session, then we don't talk about that. We have governmental immunity, we have the defense of the Attorney General's office and our own legal counsel for any decisions. If somebody wants to challenge that, If we go outside of the rules, by the way, we're still considered an actor of the state, but as an individual agent, and we are personally liable. So think about your homeowner's insurance and liability for the decision you make. So a personnel decision, a real estate decision, you are personally liable. And, you know, as I've gone and talked about to board members, I get nervous. It's not just being collegial, it's for our protection and for the protection of our families, actually, because that's how the law reads. And I think that's, you know, I'll send you a really fun document from the Cleveland Law Review that says the suability of school districts or school boards and school board members. And that, I guarantee you, has changed how my approach to a lot of the things that I do.
That would be helpful. Thank you. I also like in bullet point number 3 where it says, refrain from promoting an individual agenda, but better that we work in the best interest of the district as a whole. I understand that we're not always going to agree on everything, but once we come to a decision, it's best to move forward. I like how in the new board member training that the USBA did, we talked about unity and moving forward once we've made a decision. But when you're making a decision, it's best to look at what's going to be best for the entire district. Bullet point number 6. Understand the distinctions between board and staff roles and refrain from performing management functions that are the responsibility of the superintendent, business administrator, and staff. So we have 2 people that work for us, the business administrator and the superintendent. So those are the 2 people that we can really work with the most. That doesn't mean that we don't have questions that come up during maybe a constituent reaches out to us, or we've been at another meeting and we have a question. I guess the best policy would be is, you know, if something were to come up and it's under elementary education, we know that Alex is the guy over elementary education. However, it would be best practice if you need to reach out to him to also CC the superintendent at the same time so that he's aware of the conversation that's going on between them. And same as we go for, if you have a question for Stephanie or any of the people that fall under Stephanie, make sure that you CC Stephanie as well.
So as you know, for years I've just been thinking, oh, we're doing this unity thing to be collegial, and I had a basic understanding of that coming to agreement or supporting the decision after it's made. So of saying yes, you know, I didn't vote that way, but that's legitimizing the process again. And the more I see other board members sort of go, you know what, I didn't vote this way, but I'm going to continue to attack on that decision. What that does is, in effect, it harms the future. It doesn't ever repair the past. It harms their next decision and their next decision, even if they're not really related, because it harms the legitimacy of the process, that everything is constantly in the air. And then again, with that, who are my employees? Stephanie and Keith are the ones, and everything else I have to go into knowing. I think it's good that we learn how to govern through questions. I think it's good we visit schools. I think it's good we have good relationship with many employees through the district, that we ask questions. But the minute we start saying this is how this should be, or this is what I'm going to fix, or this is what, remember, we're not acting as a board, we're acting as individual, and again, we're personally liable if that goes wrong. But part of that comes down to, we all hear this saying, you know, that this is someone's life and this is how much we know about their life. Well, this is the school district and this is our context for the school district. And the more we can come to the superintendent and the business administrator to at least increase our context a little bit better, we're always better off. But that doesn't mean we don't get to ask questions. And some of the best decisions and some of the best changes in the school district came from school board members asking a great question. Very few came from a school board member's idea. You know what? This is what's going to happen. But lots of good changes came from a great question from a school board member.
And going along with that, the next bullet point says, understand that the authority rests with the board as a whole and not with the individual. Just remember, you're one member of this board. That's something I always need to remind myself, that we need to come together as a vote, and just always make sure that when you're stating your opinion, whether it be on Facebook or replying to a constituent, or if you're anyway, or talking to somebody, always just make sure that this is, to remind them that that is your opinion, unless it's been something that's been voted on by the board. Okay.
The problem is people listen to us too much. So they think that we know what's going on. It's like, okay.
One other thing I wanted to just say too is that we'll participate in professional development and commit the time and effort necessary. We're given a lot of resources, like we just had USBA. I know that that was shortened, but it was a good resource for this year. We also do the Power Up, USBA Power Up. I found that to be a really good resource for me to get training. I appreciate when Stephanie sends us things that we should we need to watch and for continual learning. So.
And I appreciate when Jennifer would send out those reminders, because I would not have done it if it wasn't for those. So thank you, Jennifer.
Power up. Yeah.
Those were awesome.
So yeah, so continue doing those, and hopefully someday we can go back to doing NSBA too. NSBA will be online this year, right?
Yes.
Okay. Keeping the board members, we've talked a lot about, you know, we want to keep students as our achievement and learning for all students as our primary focus. We want to respect each other with dignity and integrity. The other thing is we want to respect and support and uphold the final decision, similar to what board member Jensen has been saying about, you know, trust that process of what goes through. I'm going to be trying to do better this coming year with Robert Rules of Order and asking for, you know, people to raise their hands so that everybody will have an opportunity to speak. I want to make sure that everybody has that airtime available as well. So I appreciate it if you'll work with me as we kind of transition through that a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the relationship between our two employees, the superintendent and the business administrator. So we need to remember that we cannot direct anybody in the district besides our two employees. And even then, we can't just tell, one of us just can't tell the superintendent or our business administrator, you need to go do this. We can ask them questions. We can ask them, you know, say, hey, I have, you know, what about this? You know, you can ask them things, but we need to do it in a way that we're not micromanaging how they're running the district as well. We've hired them for a purpose, and we need to let them do their job. But also, feel free to ask those questions, like board member Jensen said. Asking those questions help progress the district and cause change.
Go ahead. I just want to add one quick thing, and if we do feel like we need to direct the superintendent or the business administrator, we need to do that through a majority directive. So if we perhaps send out an email, say, you know, one person can say, I want this to happen. If 4 or more agree, then we can give that directive as a board, but it has to be as a board.
Right. And if you ever have questions, if you need to do that, feel free to CC Rebecca and I, and so we can see that there's, you know, more than one person that's interested in that, so we can start looking ahead and say, hey, that would be a great topic for another study session or whatnot. Board Member Partridge.
Okay, this brings up a question that I always wonder when I go to send an email. When would it be appropriate to email the whole board so everybody's aware of my question versus just the superintendent and copying our leadership?
Do you want to respond to that, Board Member Jensen?
Yes. So, by the way, very few boards do this correctly, including ours. And I think that there's some time limits, so I don't think we need to worry about some of the things we have done in the past. But I just did a training for a school board yesterday on open meeting law. And basically, if all of us are on an email, we have convened a public meeting without notice. Any decision taken from that information can be reversed because it was made in a meeting, it was discussed in a meeting that wasn't noticed. This is becoming more prevalent as the Google machine is seeing how giving people strategies on how to fight for their point of view. So Amber Schill, the new president of the USBA of Canyons, she has sent one email to her entire board. She's been on her board for 9 years. And they've had some, different training on that. By the way, so the case that I taught is from Massachusetts. That was an email that was sent by a board member. No board member responded. It just was to all the board members, and she made a point. She made an argument for something that would be voted on, and that was overturned. They said, nope, you can't decide that because you've now discussed it in an unnoticed view.
I was actually going to bring up very similar, that I feel like if we are going to address something to the entire board, I think it needs to be for information only.
Yep, we need to discuss.
And that
this is coming up on the agenda, but sort of anything that's a point of view, this is the final. So as another, because law is so squishy, and our open meeting law in Utah is quite a few years old, and the only things that have been reviewed and updated is how much training, how much requirements is that you put in front of you. So the most recent attempt to sort of update to account for electronic communication is actually in California, and they passed a new open meeting law in September that specifically deals with social media. And basically in the law it says that if you're on if you make a Facebook post saying this is what we should do, not these are the questions we're asking, this is what's important to me, this is, it sort of it implies this is my position on this issue. If and you're friends with all the school board, if somebody comments, another school board member, you've convened an unnoticed public meeting. They said if you put an emoji that's a smiley face, like I've seen it, but it doesn't say yes. If it's a like or a thumbs up, you've expressed an opinion. or thumbs down, and that's specifically outlawed in their new law from September.
Thumbs down?
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down are outlawed.
Thumbs up, emojis.
Emojis are outlawed, but, okay.
Because it expresses this how this is. And so,
Ms.
yeah.
Bryant.
So is the differentiation, you can have an email or other communication as a group as long as it's just informational?
Yeah, so you're not.
So somebody has a question, say Jennifer has a question about something in the finances and she thinks this is probably good information the whole board should know. There's no decision being made, so that's okay.
Yes,
Or
and
if
even
Keith or I
emails
need
coming
to-
back from staff, you're not elected, that says this is the information you has requested, this is great. But if we say, I'm arguing, basically it's anything that can be described as debate that should happen in a public meeting, should happen in a notice, this is what we need to do, and, then that's the one that, again, a lot of it seems silly and lots of it would go forever, but if there's an issue, and we've had some experience with an issue that when people are looking for a way to stop an issue that they're really passionate about, we have some exposure if we do it wrong. So, yeah.
I have a
Go ahead,
question.
Board
And so
Member
then,
Nelson.
so then in the past where when we were trying to get an item on the agenda, excuse me, we've done that through email and asked for support for that agenda item so that we can then put it on. So how should we do that in the future? How does that?
I think, again, I think this needs to be discussed, where this vote goes. You don't even know,
So then can someone then therefore say, I'm in favor of putting that on the agenda? Because that sounds like a decision.
We need to talk about this, absolutely.
Right, I just don't think we should, let's say something were to be said, I want something to be put on the agenda. Obviously, the board, especially the board presidency, needs to be aware of that. But
Can
I
we
don't
say
think we need to be discussing what the actual issue is. It's just, do we put this on the agenda or not?
So we can't even say why we want it on the agenda? I can't give some context and say, hey, I've noticed this and that and the other, and this is concerning to me. Can we add this to the agenda? Or do I just have to simply say, I want to talk about X, Y, Z?
It's clear that that you haven't, that you're not, this is the end of where this has to go. I've noticed this going on. We need to discuss this.
Okay.
Then we're on the right side of the ridge, I guess.
Okay, so I can state my concerns and why I am bringing up a certain topic and ask for support to put it on an agenda, but I cannot entertain any discussion.
This is how this is, yeah.
Right.
Seems super squishy.
It is squishy.
It is.
So, I don't know.
And
But you have to
again,
remember,
Let's just do what we're doing until we get litigated, and then we'll actually get an answer.
Right, but obviously.
But if we can try to change our way we've been doing things, it would be better.
Okay.
And certainly, I think that it pays, good attention to, it pays, I think we should be conscious of those things that, we know if we had to change a boundary, we should probably be extra careful. Does that make sense? If we know that this is, I describe it as a ridge because we can feel like when it's heightened. Does that make sense?
And so the penalty is your decision can be reversed.
Yes.
And so that's the penalty. But does it get reversed if you have the full argument or conversation as a board after those emails? And then what happens after that? The decision gets reversed, and then you have the same conversation that you had in the first meeting, and then it gets passed?
So
because it's not like they can limit your ability to make that decision. It just seems like there's no teeth in this rule.
It's so and again, ours is a little bit different, and so it would have to go to court to set a precedent for our specific ruling, but it provides sort of an opening to delay, certainly, and you think about a delay of a bond sale. That might have a big impact just in the delay. So if it says that decision was made improperly, certainly a court might impose, the court can decide. A court can decide this particular board member can participate in the decision, and you still have to come to a majority. You know, you're precluded from making a vote. All sorts of remedies are there.
It just seems like it's too difficult because, like Rebecca said, you have to make an argument why an item should be a discussion, and that's
So
going to
I
involve
think if
opinion.
she's sending out the information, and then we just need to reply yes or no, I want to discuss this more.
Yeah.
But that's where it needs
And that's
to
pretty
end. We
much what
don't need to have the
I
discussion
don't know if we've ever
via
had the
email.
discussion back and forth where
So-
we're trying to form an opinion. I've never really noticed that in our emails. It's more like, I think this is important for this reason, and someone says, well, I don't think it's that important. So it is still a little bit of a discussion. It's not a debate, but it's a discussion. And so, I don't know, it seems really squishy because you have to make the argument to make an item a discussion item, and that involves some persuasion.
Right.
But if you do too much persuasion, then you've violated it, and now your meeting's going to be late.
Open meeting.
Right, and again, it's how anybody can read it. And again, our likelihood of leaving, but it's just that likelihood of, I'm going to bring this up. And we've had people bring this up and delay or you know, those type of things, that it's nice to know where sort of just to be able to, you know, take a look at an email and go, what's the worst somebody can read this as, and go, I could do this a different way, or I could, you know, I've been visiting at the schools, I think we should discuss this, you know, without a lot of detail. For the most part, shorter emails are better. I think, you know, one of the things that it also brings to mind is some of what we've been asked to do on social media, because we hear a lot, oh, the board should take care of that on the social media. I don't know if that's right. I think after sending us a decision after, I think that's probably, you know, fine for a board member to do. But as we're getting ready for a decision, the stuff we put on social media,
Well, and that's why I was trying to be very clear that if you're doing anything on social media or emails or whatever, you have to be clear that that is your opinion and your opinion only.
that's right.
Be very clear about that.
And we have to be conscious of, again, did we weigh in? Yeah, that was great.
So then, to clarify on like social media type things, is it okay if I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
If we're very clear that it's our opinion and ours only, and that this is information only, and that I'm not giving an opinion, but I'm trying to give information only, does that count as being okay as long as no other board member on here gives a thumbs up?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just everyone be
So
clear.
the language in the California law says, you know, agents of the state can act freely and express openly on social media. The problem is the next person that weighs in.
So we just can't like or dislike.
So, yeah.
And how about in response to something Nate says, I can't like click reply and respond to his item. I maybe just have to make my own item, my own little comment.
It's how it can be read. If they're like,
Okay.
oh, you're you know, getting support in this direction, then you've convened an open meeting, and
I'm wondering.
without noticing. But if it's like, so we're glad you brought this up. We'll be discussing this in the next board meeting. This is going to be a great discussion. You know.
I can see maybe we could spend a little bit more time in another study session
Yep.
further on social media itself, and I think we could do that. I just want to be aware of time today.
Yep.
Are you guys okay if we move on from that and put that on another time to discuss social media,
Yes.
especially?
Can I ask, sorry, one more quick question?
Yes.
What about just conversations between myself and you? Or like just a conversation we have
Those are
outside?
Those are specific in the law that, you know, then the quorum rules. So, you know, one of the most important thing is how to count. I think that we've had an excellent practice, you know, but also of how we do on committees. And so, but I've noticed something that's got other school districts in trouble that I volunteered for last meeting. You know, they said, well, do you want a third member on the audit committee? And 3 is getting that close. If we 3 can get together and we decide, then we just look for which is the easy one to pick off to get our quorum in the meeting. So maybe I shouldn't be on the audit committee. Maybe we should. It's good practice that, you know, for a board our size, that 2. It's down from, you know, just for the comfort of the public and the good discussion that should happen with all of us.
That's a good way to get out of that committee, okay.
It's the best committee.
It is. You and I, Nate.
Only because of Stephanie and Devin.
Just a heads up, if you have a concern about the business administrator or the superintendent, please reach out to Rebecca and I, and then we can take it from there. Okay. Other things, we talked a little bit about this. If you want to request something on an agenda, we need to have at least, you know, please reach out to board member Nielsen and I, or, you know, we need to get at least 3 board members that would like to discuss it. We kind of talked about that. Remember, we can talk about that a little bit more. But yes, I want to hear what things that you're interested in, you know, questions you have, things that we could talk about in the coming year. Complaints from the community. I'm sure some of you have had emails from community members before. Something I like to remember is I think a board member is probably the last person that should be taking care of a problem. Remember the hierarchy of where maybe it is. You can always direct that constituent to say, well, for example, let's say it's somebody on a soccer team. Well, have they talked to the coach first? If they haven't talked to the coach, well, if I can't talk to the coach, well, have you talked to the athletic director? Have you then talked to the principal? Have they then talked to the superintendent over secondary schools? Have you then talked to the superintendent? I think going to the board member, we can then give that information back, but I don't think it's our responsibility to always solve the problem. Any comments on that? Go ahead.
I see one of our responsibilities is to help teach people, you know, where they can go,
right,
how to direct their questions or their concerns.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying direct them where to go, but it's not necessarily our to solve. So forget about early mornings in here. So okay, I talked a little bit about Power Up on USBA. We have our goals. We have 5 goals in the board, under the board, that we can always discuss these further. I think goal number 1 is a good one for our continuous academic improvement. This is good for community councils when you guys go to learn about trust lands, understand, you know, how we're improving. Superintendent, I was going to ask you a question on this one. Due to the pandemic and COVID, our graduation rate still going to try to be at 95% by 2022?
Yeah, that's going to be hard. I think it's going to be really hard to achieve this time around. But I'm not going to suggest that we change those goals at all.
Okay.
I say we still aim for it.
I agree. I think let's have a high goal rather than a low goal. So let's try to achieve that. Do you have anything to add on these pages?
I would just add that these are our goals, and they should govern our decisions. And so where we say our very first goal is, you know, continuous academic achievement, that's where we need to put first whenever we're thinking and discussing, is whatever choice we're making going to help us achieve these goals, with first being continuous academic achievement, and second being support for teachers, and on and on. And so I think it's just really good to be completely familiar with these goals and keep them top of mind as we make decisions, because they should help govern the decisions we make.
Yeah. And in goal number 3, I read one of the bullet points, the last bullet point on page 12, where it says establish a comprehensive set of communication practices with students, parents, and community. I would like to add this to our board study session in February to have a follow-up about communication that we started in the October study session, just so you guys are aware of that at the board retreat. Sorry. One of the other things to note in goal number 4, it talks about multi-year facilities planning. We also have to remind ourselves as a board, we cannot bind future boards. So we can't make plans that say, oh, in 2027, we're going to build this school. We cannot bind future boards. Just something to remember. We talked about, we'll be talking more about communication in our goal 5, again, coming up in the board retreat. We have our different meetings. We have our study sessions and our executive sessions. The business.
Melanie, can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things, and I've been doing this now in Provo for, this is my 9th year. Over the years, we've had the occasional challenge with people being, board members being a little bit less than careful about keeping executive sessions confidential. And, it gets back to the whole question about why would we hold an executive session? What are the rules about when you can hold a closed meeting? And so we've got that document out there for everybody, but I'm especially wanting to just remind everybody that, we go into closed sessions like that to discuss personnel or to discuss real estate or discuss something that really we're doing it because it's the kind of conversation that has to happen, but it's not best held in the public eye. And so, for example, real estate negotiations. There have been times in this state where boards have let information out and it's actually cost the district more money. So we just have to be really careful about understanding that if there's a topic in executive session, it's not for discussion in any other setting. It's not to be referenced anywhere else. It is specifically a closed session discussion for a lot of reasons. If it's a personnel matter, it might be because if somebody says something wrong, we're dealing with some type of litigation about an unfair employment practice or something like that. So there could be any number of challenges that go with this. So executive sessions, they are to be confidential.
Thank you. Board member reports, talks just about 3 minutes in length. Talk about recent activities in your official capacity. And it's a good opportunity to make positive statements about the district that you're seeing as well. Different board.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have a schedule of who's doing when?
Bonnie will email you and let you know that you're on it. So we usually do on a rotating basis.
Okay, because since I've never done one before, I want to prepare so I don't look like an idiot.
She'll let you know if you, at least 4 or 5 days in advance. So,
Thanks.
yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. Okay. Quorum is a 4. Chance meeting is not a quorum. So if we just happen to be at Cafe Rio at the same time, that's a chance meeting. But it doesn't mean we talk about board issues. So just remember that. Okay. Again, we talked about USBA, NSBA, those different things. The only other one was graduation ceremonies. I know there was a question about graduation. I don't believe it's the board's position to tell how the schools are going to do their graduations. I think it's the board's position to show up and congratulate and support. We can, superintendent, if we get information from somebody saying, hey, we want it to be done this way, who should we direct that to? To just you?
Yeah, in all cases, you can feel free to direct them to me. That would be fine.
Okay.
Melanie?
Yes, go ahead.
Who schedules them? Last year, I think because of the pandemic, I heard some talk that a couple of schools either changed theirs. Do we schedule those or do the high school schedule those?
So, Todd, do you want to speak to that about who schedules the graduations?
So I coordinate with the schools themselves to set up the graduation ceremony. It was 2 years ago we made the move from UVU to the Marriott Center. Obviously last year it didn't take place because of the pandemic. We're tentatively scheduled to be at the Marriott Center again this year, but it's again depending on their schedule and the pandemic and how that might affect. So we're still unsure of what this year is going to look like.
And if they want to change the day or the time, they go through you?
They work through us, yes.
Thank you.
And also, Todd, if we go to somebody else's building, they also have their own rules, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about graduation? And the graduation speech, we rotate those, we assign those, and those are about roughly 3 minutes long. And what's nice in this board handbook, it does say what you have to say at the end, which is nice. A good reminder. I did like the lessons learned from previous board members. Always 2 sides to every story. Board members' words carry great weight. Choose them carefully. Listening to only those who yell loudest does not serve students. Respect boundaries. Legislators are human too. Always ask, will it improve student learning? USBA is your best friend. You are only one vote. Come prepared to your meetings. Have a sense of humor. Don't take yourself too seriously, but you are doing important work, and we appreciate that you guys volunteered to do this, and were voted in. Ask lots of questions. We talked about that before. Take advantage of a lot of training opportunities. And I really enjoy like this, taking opportunities, like if you can go to, basketball games, plays, things that might be happening at the elementary schools, stay involved with those things. That's a fun way to get to know the community in those ways. Tell people thank you a lot. It's always a good way to do that. And the last one says, go to the Capitol during session, and you'll send out ways we can see that.
Yeah, I mean, if you click on if you go to le.utah.gov right now, you can, for the most part, they've actually gotten really, really good. Every committee meeting is a webinar. You can, it says, register for public comment, but they've asked, is anybody else? And you can raise your hand, and they'll open your mic, and you can comment. Again, I'm conscious when I go to those tables to testify that, if I'm representing USBA, I have to say who, or this is private citizen. I don't even use the title, and I'm a citizen. So even with the school board, if we've discussed it, certainly we know where this comes down. But I think maybe just use your name. I'm McKay Jensen from Provo, and my experience with schools, this is how this is. But they're open to that. Right now they are struggling with COVID infections, so it is open to the public, but I wouldn't go. So executive appropriations started this morning at 8. They're doing line items. The difference in this year is that all the money is voted on Thursday, not at the end of the session.
Wow.
It's in the base budget, and the base budget it almost always passes almost unanimously, and is not. And so all the big ticket items, so the governor's $430 million is in the base budget. So.
Okay.
Where can you find the link to the JLC meetings?
As I saying, can you send out a link to all
Yeah,
of us?
well, I'll forward that. If I forward, I'll just send it to the Board of Education, right?
Yeah,
And that'll be
and
great.
then USB, I mean, I think everybody would want that.
Sure. Remember the rules for JLC is that you have to be a member of JLC to make a motion or to vote. But anybody can raise their hand and go, I just want to clarify, or I have a question. And so.
Okay. Again, Robert Rules of Order. I'm going to just try to keep, work with me this year. I appreciate, raising of hands. I'll call on you just so that we can make sure that people have. Try to limit your comments to, a couple minutes or less. If you have questions during somebody else's, maybe make a note of it so that when it's your turn to talk, or get called on, you have it written down so that everybody has a turn during a motion. I found that interesting in here. It says no member may speak more than once to any motion, but the president may choose to not enforce this rule if we feel it appropriate. So I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak during every motion if they feel like it. So any questions on that? Do you have anything to add on Robert's rules? Or?
I would just add that it was really eye-opening to read this. I've read it before, but I have forgotten about most of this because we've been a little bit more casual about it. So are we going to be as formal as this outlines, or are we?
I think we'll be transitioning.
Transitioning,
yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway.
The point of Robert's Rules is so that the record is clear. Beyond that, it's to control the meeting. So obviously the more intense, we should know that Robert's Rules insisting on more formality is a good way to make the meeting go.
Right.
And so, but informality is not, as long as the meeting is clear for the record, for the recording, for Bonnie to say who made a motion, how was that done, then that's the only statutory part of that. And I've appreciated, I've seen other school boards actually create bad feelings because an experienced president will go, you're out of order. You don't know how to do this. You're not, and they sort of use that as a weapon. And I've appreciated, the spirit on our meetings, but at the same time, we should recognize that that's a tool in the leadership's pocket to make the meeting go. Right. And insist on more formality.
Just to finish up, there's a district financial summary. If any of you have questions, I'm sure Stephanie would be happy to answer any of the questions about, there's a lot of different budgets and different levies and different things, and I'm sure she'd be happy to work with any of you if you have questions on those.
I have
Go ahead.
Are you done? I have a few questions if you're done.
For that?
About the handbook?
Yeah, just let me finish just a couple. There's also, it talks about different roles in the district, and we know who those people are. Remember, if you need to email Jason Cox or Anne-Marie, remember to always CC the superintendent on any of those things. Go ahead.
On page 13 with the goal 4, when it talks about replacement cycles, are we coordinating those with the state school board? Because I know they do have a schedule with their replacing curriculum. Are we coordinating with them?
Anne-Marie can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Well, coming up, we'll also mention that by the state constitution, actually, remember that the state school board curriculum is there as a resource that we can tap into, but the local board absolutely has every authority over a curriculum. So so we can save money. We look at that as a resource to save money, and how we go about that and its review. But the local board has absolute control over curriculum within our own district.
Yeah, so the state typically sets the standards, meaning the learning goals for students for each course that we have, with the exception of there is the ability for a district to create their own courses, and then districts, LEAs, have the responsibility for providing teaching materials. So about 3 years ago, the state got on a standards review cycle, and at that time we changed that to match our curriculum review cycle. It's difficult because curriculum, the maximum contract is 5 years that we can do for purchasing, and the curriculum review cycle that or the standards review cycle the state has is about 7 to 9 years, based on a couple of factors. So it also assumes an ongoing curriculum budget, and I think that that is the way of the future. But currently, yes, we are aligned and we're working that direction. So for instance, the state is currently working on K-12 literacy standards. We have a few people from my department working on that team, and then we will be looking at buying supportive teaching materials.
Okay. Clarification, where was that in the board handbook?
Page 13.
Uh-huh.
There's a bunch of bullet points under the goals.
The curriculum purchases and replacement cycles.
Okay.
Yeah, we have policy 4020 addressing that.
I don't know why I'm not seeing it
I'm
on
not
page
either.
13 either.
It's on page 13 of the printed out one.
Oh, got it, right
Got
there.
it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then my next question is on page 8, it talks about policy 1430 about public comments, but then it also mentions it on page 17. And it also coordinates with policy 1420. So 1430 about public comment was approved in 2012, and then policy 1420 was approved in 2013. And now that board meetings are put on YouTube, we should probably update that. Electronic meetings policy, so that YouTube is included in that. And then also, how do we, if we're having a public meeting, and especially if it has to be all on Zoom, how do we get public comment? That hasn't
So I think these are all good things that we can discuss at another time.
updated,
So I will make a note of that for these policies, but I don't think this is the time to discuss that, but I appreciate you bringing it up.
And there's also on policy 1430, on the second set of numbers, there's 4 numbers, there's something that says the total window of time for public comments will be up to 15 minutes in duration for each agenda item. And I don't think that's been happening.
Okay, so again, I appreciate you bringing this up, and we will bring it up on another date. Okay?
And then on page 23, it talks about property taxes, and I know that there's a agenda item with the state legislature. McKay, do you know if that applies for school boards?
So the state is looking at their portion at the basic rate that funds the minimum school program, but that is never
Doesn't apply to us.
right. So if they, the only thing they're looking at is how, if they make adjustments to being able to use our capital levies differently. So, but there's no adjustment on the levels or
how
at the
that
moment.
applies.
Yeah, so
Okay, thank
the
you.
basic rate might apply to our, our total cap levels, but they always have that authority. It's not something we can decide or one way or the other, and there's lots of pressures both ways. Nobody likes taxes, and no one wants to be a politician that raises taxes.
Thank you. And then on page 30, communications, it says Blackboard, but is that still used, or did we switch to Canvas? Does that need to be changed?
Caleb's not here, but I think Blackboard is one of our places that we communicate with parents, isn't it?
I don't
Odd,
know.
Alex, yeah.
So,
I'm on Zoom. I can answer that question.
go ahead, Caleb.
So Blackboard is, they bought ParentLink, so that's our call out system is Blackboard. And it's not the same as Canvas or anything like that.
So they're all used for different things then? Okay.
Yep.
That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. I know that that was kind of a quick review of the whole handbook. I know that each of you have read through it, and just keep it handy. I know I'm going to be rereading it and continually reading and keep learning. So I appreciate everybody in this discussion, and look forward to this coming year. Go ahead, Board Member Partridge.
I just wanted to say thank you to Bonnie, and I know Keith also spent a lot of time on this. It's really well done and very thorough and a good format, and I really appreciate all the work you put into it.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree. Next, we're going to move on to the attendance policy, and Doug Finch will be discussing that.
Good morning, Board. Student Services and School-Based Leadership comes to you today wanting to discuss, based on the decision to go back to 5-day learning in our schools, how to address the board's resolution that they passed on July 30th, where it just recall that unanimous decision to approve this resolution stated that it just kind of states that Utah's in a state of emergency and so forth, and says that the board has determined to suspend policy 3150, which is our student attendance policy. And it just again speaks because of the nature of the pandemic, encouraging us to use some flexibility in order to create scheduling and so forth that we had to do during the pandemic. So today we just come to you with just a request for some guidance. Is the school-based leadership and student services is now looking to see to what degree we begin to enforce and communicate with our parents compulsory attendance expectations, as well as begin to fulfill some of those things that could be available to us as tools of motivation and reinforcement of individuals having their kids at school. So that's the issue that I bring before you today. Excuse me, we have a number of the schools that again would like to, with the expectation that when we identify a student who is attending all 5 days, that they begin to not only take attendance but begin the process of reinforcing that. So whether the board wants to just discuss and have in the minutes today that they are reinstating that, or whether they want to continue to watch and study that, we'll just default to your judgment today.
So it's my understanding that we do not have to take a formal vote on this because the attendance policy is already in place. It's just a matter of whether or not we want to just continue with the participation or not. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and let me just give a little clarification around that. I think you've seen probably in the weekly participation emails that I've sent out and included you as board members in that. Our intention still is for individuals who are not attending in person that we will continue to mark their engagement through a participation score. Otherwise, it's hard for us to frankly justify the membership and the WPU we claim with them if we are saying that we are regularly engaging with them and have a score or mark that's regularly taken. So our intention is still to continue that with students who aren't in the situation where they're going to come all 5 days. But those that are attending 5 days, the schools have requested that perhaps we forego or discontinue making participation marks for those that are attending and simply work off of attendance and begin again the enforcement of all of the policies and procedures associated with mandatory attendance.
Can I ask a question with the attendance?
Yes.
With the pandemic still going on, are we going to have some leniency there if a child feels sick? Because we would rather that they stay home during this time.
Yeah, that would be the direction coming from my office, as I know as well from school leadership, that we still have a great deal of understanding and compassion as it's associated with individual cases. That there wouldn't be this, carte blanche or sending compulsory ed letters and threatening to go to court and all those sorts of things with individuals. If there's illness, whether it be illness in the home or again, things associated with COVID, the quarantines and isolations that are required, that those things would not count toward anyone, therefore receiving any sort of consequences. The intent here is that there is some students within our school district who have not due necessarily probably to maybe illness or so forth, have stopped engaging and attending, and you've seen those numbers in the weekly reports I provide for you. There's an intent to try and really be able to continue the outreach that we've done, but also with this added piece that our policy is in full sway. We'd like to make sure that we have you engage with us with the expectation you begin to have your students attend when you can. That's a conversation that some of them have felt like they haven't been able to do because it's been, really widely known that we have suspended our attendance policy this year.
Other questions?
I think, Jennifer, you had one.
It was actually basically what Melanie was saying. I've heard from several parents that are just concerned that they don't want to send their student
Right.
if they have a really bad cold or things like that. And so I just hope that we make it clear that we don't want anyone sending anybody to school sick.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
otherwise, we want you in school.
Yeah, and in student services, we have policies that also talk about not sending your kids to school sick. And so we'll reference those same sort of guidelines and trust parents' ability to make those decisions. Now, sometimes there can be a little bit of excuse making or so forth, so there might be some sort of understanding, if not occasional medical notes that would be required to document that there are some medical concerns. But in general, we want to continue to operate under an approach of trust and transparency with our community. We don't want to get sideways with them. We don't want to make bad relations here. We want to continue to have people feel like their places with Provo City School District. We're just concerned about the ones who have not been coming and engaging with us this school year. McKay.
So the intent of suspending the attendance policy was to give maximum flexibility to create the best environment we could. But the best environment, that didn't mean that, we wouldn't require engagement and wouldn't back up a principal for that matter to say, you know what, we need to find a different opportunity for a parent, or we need to do something else. I'm worried about just the message of attendance. Still, I think it's we have a vaccine a little bit in the community, and things are getting better, and people are more optimistic, but things are still troublesome and are worrisome and anxiety-inducing for some parents. Do we need to come up with an engagement policy to say,
Wondered that too.
That expresses part of these ideas that still gives a nod to the flexibility that our community still needs, but moves us back towards the communication with the school that we need to be able to serve our students best, that if they're just not anywhere, that doesn't help us help them. And so if there's an engagement policy or something, how do we thread this needle, especially when the headline is going to be attendance has been addressed here?
I appreciate that, McKay, and I couldn't agree more, because the minute we say that this is the way we're going, and then we have to move a school to phase 1 for whatever reason, for health concerns, or continue to work with those that we do have the agreement that we're going to provide them home study support in limited numbers. You're right, there is a needle to thread here, so that's why I'm saying I'm hoping for the wisdom of this group, particularly as you're really tied into the community to know what the perception would be about us trying to do all the right intentions around expecting attendance, but if we don't communicate that right and give the right kind of support, it could come back to be something that's a negative message, and that's not what we need right now. So I appreciate that, McKay. And whether it's an engagement policy or something around the attendance policy has language that speaks to that, I'm open to an idea to study that a little bit more too. So I said, thank you for this rich, and I don't want to take all your time, but this is very helpful as I direct schools and my staff what to do now with student attendance. Nate, did you have something?
Oh, I was just, first of all, our participation grades were great this week. It was really nice to see. So hopefully we should have the end of term every single day. Teachers would love that. But McKay makes a good point, but I also really like having an attendance policy, and it's a really tough line to straddle, but there needs to be some social encouragement, those phone calls, those things that parents remember. Oh yeah, my kids actually go to school, and I, for one, am looking forward to that, and I know a lot of parents that I've talked to are looking forward to being able to tell their kids, no, you actually have to go to school, because right now there's a real squishy, that's our word of the day, a squishy feeling, for at least a lot of the older kids, about the necessity of attending school.
Thank you, Nate. And I think some of the things like you mentioned there, it's the way we support and reinforce that policy is where we do have some judgment that we can make. So having it in place, but yet you just touched on one of the things that we're looking forward as a staff to doing is perhaps in February beginning to initiate the calling system again on the Blackboard system that Terry brought up earlier, that we would initiate that automatic caller again, not to pester people, but to give them notification. We're back in school 5 days. Your student missed today 1 or more periods, and I know all of you know by heart what that
I
phone
got
call
3
sounds
of those
like.
calls every day when my son was a senior, so I hate those calls, but they're helpful.
But it's that kind
They're
of
helpful.
notification
Yeah.
in working with families again that we have turned that off. But again, in working with school principals, they feel like that would be helpful as far as beginning to communicate this expectation. We're missing your kids, and we want to make sure that you know that we know, so that we can work together to have your kids access their learning again. So, but as far as again going hardcore and getting to the door and saying we're taking you to court and those sorts of things, that is not what the guidance would be from my end, nor do I feel it from the school leadership that they're really wanting to hammer people with this. I think they're trying to bring back from squishy to a little more firm the way that we feel about students needing to be in school where they can learn. Any other guidance or thought? This is very helpful to me. Anything else,
Okay,
Melanie,
no,
that
I
I
would
can
just say
provide
that-
you so that you can, again?
Yeah, I feel like that we can move forward with the attendance policy, knowing, as we stated very clearly that we're going to have there's going to be some leniency there.
Okay, so if I've
given-
heard you right, then we're reinstating that to be part of our minutes today, that the attendance policy is no longer suspended. It's in full sway again, but the way that we work with individuals that are having attendance concerns, we will continue to be very understanding and lenient as it relates to the family's issues, whether they be medical, anxiety related, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, again, it's just person by person work. That attendance is one of those things that is usually, if someone's not coming, there's something behind that is helpful to know. It's kind of a barometer for other types of problems, and being engaged in that, whether it was through the engagement scores that we were doing or now through attendance, it really helps us to be able to provide more wraparound service and support to the family when we find out they're having a hard time getting where they need to be. So we'll take that very wraparound, supportive approach if everyone's comfortable with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have reached the end of our agenda, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.